Okay, I'd like to call to order our city council meeting Monday, February 3rd, 2025 at 7:02 p.m. Let's rise for pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag, States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Andrew LaFrance is excused absent. Everybody else is here. You guys hopefully have had a chance to look at the agenda. Oh, I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda.
Moved.
Council Haugen makes a motion to approve tonight's agenda as written. Any seconds?
Okay.
By Council President Miller. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Actually, Mr. Mayor, sorry, I didn't chime in for discussion there. We just got out of work session for the record, and I don't think we came to a determination on how we want to proceed with that. We do have number 6, executive session, employee evaluations. Do we want to make any amendments to that?
True. I think, personally speaking, we probably aren't ready to go into executive session, and to do the review in executive session, we're actually talking the review, not necessarily the process. We can't make any votes or any in executive session. Would it make more sense to cross that one off and go back into an open session to discuss city manager review? Or
Yeah.
I know, we can go into executive session.
Now?
No, at the end, and it's evaluation. We ready to go through either the, competencies or the evaluation check-in and have a discussion.
We haven't made a decision on what criteria we're going to. I recall, it's either recommendation of the criteria that Ben provided or the recommendation provided. I think we have to make a decision there on what we're going to use to go to the executive session, do the 6-year evaluation. Then leave. We can then have another work session to determine if we're doing early and then what we're going to use, because we just need to.
What about then crossing off 6 and 7 and just doing the 8, the city manager review process? Like, we can discuss it some more, and if we want to vote on a process at that time, we can vote on it.
Okay. So do we need to make a amendment? Okay. Mr. Mayor, I move that council adopt the city council meeting agenda as amended, where we are removing number 6 and 7 and changing number 8 to city manager review process discussion.
We have a motion to accept tonight's agenda with the change of crossing off 6 and 7 and amending number 8, city manager review process. Second by Councilor Jacobs. Amendment, any discussion? All in favor, state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Did we have any public comment? Sure. Okay, seeing no public comment, we will skip on to the consent agenda. Tonight, we are looking at February 18, 2025 City Council work session minutes and February 18, 2025 City Council meeting minutes. Had a chance to look at those. I'm looking to make a motion to approve consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Councilor Holmes to approve tonight's consent agenda as written, and a second by Councilor Haugen. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Carries. Okay. We're on to new business. Resolution 25-01. Resolution endorsing a property acquisition for a community development center office. Assistant to City Manager, City Planner NJ Johnson, take the lead today.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor Council. So yes, this is in regard to a property acquisition that we spoke recently about in an executive session. There is a grant opportunity that came to play. It's through Oregon Main Street, which is through the state of Oregon. We, in the background, have been working with the property owner and their realtor to come to terms agreement and a sales price. Tonight is really just about the grant opportunity. So some details on that. It's a $400,000 max award. To give you an idea of what that could cover in the project, it would be about 1/3 to 1/2 of the cost, depending on what we come to in terms of the sales agreement, and then also how much the improvements on top of the initial sale price are going to cost us. It requires 30% match or 120,000, which we would easily hit with a purchase of this size. Lori also applied for a $10,000 grant for some landscaping on the property. So we're really just trying to do everything that we can to make this a fiscally responsible move for the city and CDC. Even trying to invest in property ownership, but just trying to make that loan at the end of the balance as small as possible. The remaining costs, we've worked with some of the representatives from Business Oregon. They've confirmed the availability of a 4% loan. It'd be a standard 30-year loan for a purchase like this, and it's available exclusively to cities. The Main Street grant, like I said, we've been working on it in the background. It's pretty extensive, so it's taken a while, and it has a deadline of March 13th. The resolution in the packet 2501 authorizes the city to apply for the grant by expressing your general endorsement of the project. This resolution, just to be super clear, is not an agreement to any sales terms or anything like that. It's just required for the city to move forward with the $400,000 grant.
Questions, any feedback? Council? I think it's great. I mean, I think with a grant, hard to pass up that amount of money. Really come in handy. From everything you see, this would really benefit the city. Did you say 480 at first or $400,000 grant?
400,000 is the max award.
That does cover kind of everything after just the purchase to any improvements. I mean, that could be part of it as well.
So the actual project in terms of the grant would be just the purchase. We're kind of working with the property owner in order to take care of some of those items before the sale. Yeah.
So if it was 700,000, the max grant would be 350, 50%.
No, it's so the 30%. Yeah. The 30% match means essentially the project can't be more than 520,000, or if it is, it just doesn't increase.
How long has this grant been around? Is it something that they award annually or?
I believe biannually. Lori, are you aware?
I don't think we haven't applied for this grant before.
Is there any published historical context with what grant applicants have received?
There's examples online of previous grant awardees, but Ben, you might have a little more experience.
Right, and this year is kind of more unique. They have a bigger pot than they typically have, which is exciting. So they're going to give a little bit more. They were encouraging more because they had a bigger fund to give out. But the Main Street grant it really is diverse on what they go with. When I went down to Klamath Falls, the example they gave was a hotel, and that during that year, Business Oregon was really focused on second and third level housing. So the building had been run down. So they were going to turn some of that into housing, not a hotel, but restored the hotel look because it had that downtown feel to it. They just really want to preserve that building, the historical building. So, but their grant at that time was focused mostly on the renovations of being able to add additional housing. So each year they kind of have their focus of what they really want on there, but it can be for land purchase, building purchase, renovations. It's for anything in the downtown designated area, and you have to be an affiliate or more member of Main Street Oregon. I don't remember if it's every other year, but yeah, typically they're like 200,000, but they usually max you out. This year they raised it to where you can go 400. most people ask for the total amount. There are a few situations where it's less than that because it's a smaller project, but yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of different great uses for that. There was one up in La Grande where they changed an old gas station, I believe it was, into a fast food restaurant in the downtown area and kind of renovated. So it's just really having the goal in that area to help improve your downtown, bring jobs, help restore that look and feel of that, to bring people downtown is really the goal of that. So anyway, to improve buildings.
Yeah, the grant title is, Oregon Main Street Revitalization Grant. And so some of the big emphasis you can tell is like vacant buildings that don't have any use and are just sitting there in the downtown. They want to see those restored so that, businesses or offices can be in there. Buildings that are just generally kind of eyesores in the area, things like that.
I have just a follow-up. Like, is there anything to suggest that, or is there any information that people typically get the amount that they're seeking? Or I guess that's where I was going with this question was.
Well, that's what I'm saying. They go through, they don't award everybody, obviously, but yeah, usually what you ask is what you get. If you have the whole project, they fund you the whole amount for your project. Very rarely, if at all, have I seen them fund something smaller, unless I could think of the situation if they had a project, but they just ran out of money and maybe it was the lower end of their project. So they're like, well, we only got 100,000 left to award. You still want it. Can you still do your project with that? But every example that I've seen that when I went to these conferences, it was always the full amount they were asking for. They capped it out.
Okay, thank you.
My question was, so this is just, obviously the resolution is just to go for the grant, right? And so what if we don't get it? We have 4% loan.
Back to us whether or not we want to proceed out the grant.
Right.
Yeah. It just be a different loan balance that we'd start with, and we'd have that conversation.
Is it
We'd find out, I forgot to mention this, but we'd find out mid-May on the grant.
You kind of answered this as you were going, but on the title, then is there a description underneath it, what they're looking for to tell us how much I think we would qualify? You said like old buildings, rundown building. I mean, it kind of gives you an idea of what they're looking for.
Yeah, go ahead.
We have been in contact with the grant coordinator and explained our situation explicitly, and she felt that it absolutely qualified. So the point is to bring people to your downtown and to revitalize it. It's not so much about that it has to be a historic building or anything like that. It's just get people downtown and utilize areas that may be underutilized.
Let's say on there, if you do not get this award, can you proceed with the program without this funding, like we do on our grant applications?
Yeah, it asks you like what your external sources of funding are, and so they have some idea. They don't outright ask you in that way, but
Mayor,
Yes.
can I suggest a motion? I move council approve resolution 25-01, a resolution endorsing a property acquisition for the Community Development Center office as written.
Have a motion to approve resolution 25-01, a resolution endorsing a property acquisition for the Community Development Center. It says written. Any seconds? By Counselor Jacobs. Discussion. Favor state by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Thank you. Our first resolution of the year. Thank you very much. Moving on to number 3, limited land use decision process. Community Development Director Lori.
They weren't too excited about
yeah.
my presentation. Thank
Yours
you.
was the only one they wanted to see.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor and
Yeah,
Council.
Lori, can you
Glasses half
explain to me
full.
Yes, I will walk
layman
you.
terms?
Yes, I will try as hard as I can to walk you through in layman's terms. So Senate Bill 1537 is now in effect as of January 1st. So I wanted to just walk you through a few things that are going to affect Scappoose in terms of some legislation in there. Number one, there is a new definition for limited land use. There's a list here. It's going to be tentative subdivision or partition plat, approval or denial of site development review, replats, which we process them as property line adjustments. And then the new one for us is expansion, alteration, or expansion of a non-conforming use. So that one was not in our definition previously for limited land use. Not a big deal. We will make that change along with the 50-year plan code amendments we're working on. And then any applications we get for something like that between, now and when those code amendments are in place, we will follow the state process for limited land use decisions. The big change is the process for limited land use decisions. And that's number 2 here in the list. What ORS 197195 now states is that a city shall apply the procedures in this section and only the procedures in this section to a limited land use decision. So whereas previously state statute was sort of like you can do no less than this, it's now you can do no less than and you can do no more than. You have to follow the exact procedure that's prescribed. So there's 2 places where our current process does not follow SB 1537. One of those, and so I've only highlighted those sections. The rest of the code or the process is about like what's the content in your mailed notices, things like that. Number 1 for noticing is the distance that you are required to notice. Our code went above and beyond the state minimum at some time ago and said, we'll notice to 200 feet. We're not allowed to do that anymore. We are only allowed to notice to 100 feet. So as of January 1st, we've already started this process. So because it's in direct conflict with the new legislation, we have to follow what the state statute says, which is 100 feet. Again, we've already started doing that. The other area, which is more significant, is hearings. So under the new legislation, no hearing can be held for an initial limited land use decision. So on appeal, of course, there's a hearing that would be required. But for the initial decision, you cannot hold a hearing. Currently, in our development code, the Planning Commission is listed as the approval authority for subdivisions, major partitions, and site development review. So because the Planning Commission has to meet in public and currently holds a public hearing in order to reach its final decision on all land use decisions, at this point, our code is in conflict with the new provisions. So, and then just bigger context. As part of the 50-year plan code amendments, we have already considered the fact that it is confusing sometimes for the Planning Commission to hold hearings for limited land use decisions because they are so cut and dried. It's non-discretionary, very limited, application of policy. It's just if it meets the code, you have to approve. So there have been questions sometimes, why are we seeing these applications? In a lot of cities, site development review and subdivisions are already staff approved. We did look through the code and say, hey, how about if staff approves some site development review and some subdivisions, if certain triggers aren't met, like for instance, for subdivisions, these code amendments I'm about to go over, these were already vetted by Stakeholder Advisory Committee, Council, and Planning Commission, and everyone agreed, yeah, that makes sense. So we're already moving in this direction, but then this kind of changed it a bit. So for instance, for subdivisions, we proposed if the gross acreage is 5 acres or less, if the total number of proposed lots is 20 or fewer, or the proposed number of dwelling units is 20 or fewer, then those would be staff approved. You'd still have the same noticing, you'd still incorporate any written comments that were received. And then for site development review, similar, the use is 5,000 square feet of gross floor area or less. The site is less than 1 acre. And let's see, the other one was trip generation is does not exceed 100 average daily trips. So there were a few things we had already said, everyone agreed upon, yes, those can be staff approved. What this does is basically say you cannot hold a hearing. And so as part of the final proposed amendments we would bring as we wrap up the 50-year plan later this year is to say that all limited land use decisions would be staff approved. So that would be the partitions, subdivision, site development review, replats, property line adjustments. Again, some of those are already staff approved, but this would make all of them staff approved. So the reason for that is that it doesn't really make sense to hold a public meeting when the only people that can talk are the Planning Commission and the staff. What we do now is we write a very comprehensive, as I'm sure you've seen our staff reports, a very comprehensive staff report that goes through every criteria, tells how the application meets it. Typically, the applicant, even in limited land use, would always have an opportunity to speak and to make their case. As of next week, when we hold the WANA Planning Commission hearing, the applicant will not be able to speak anymore. That is adjacent to hearing. That is not, we cannot do that anymore. We've been advised by our city attorney that it would just be staff and just the Planning Commission able to speak during that public meeting. Again, we would follow the same process. We would outline how criteria are being met. You would be able to follow, our thought process and our staff reports so that everyone who did provide written comment would get notice of the decision, just like we do now. Again, noticing would still be provided. We would still incorporate any written comments that came in. The reason, again, at the end of the day, for even proposing changes where some of the decisions would be staff-led as part of the code amendments we already proposed was that we're trying to get to where we're streamlining the land use approval process and we're getting applicants an answer sooner, make it less onerous. This would, by having all of these staff approved, which our most common application we process is site development review. That's what we see the most, that and subdivisions. This will get an answer to our applicants 4 to 6 weeks sooner on average. That's about how long it takes from the time we deem an application complete until we schedule them for Planning Commission. That gives time to write the staff report, gives time to provide the noticing to everyone and to incorporate that and then send it to staff report. It does not change anything that is discretionary, like conditional use permits or variances. Some of the other things would be like, those would still be Planning Commission. Sometimes Planning Commission is just hearing something because they're going to make a recommendation. And developments, annexation, zone change, those things would still go to Planning Commission first, and then they would make a recommendation to City Council, and you all would make that final call. So right now we are in an interim situation where, again, our city attorney has advised no discussion from the applicant during the meeting. The reason for that is because we have not amended our code yet. Anywhere where our code does not directly conflict with the new legislation, we need to follow that. So, for instance, new SB 1537 says that can't hold a hearing, but it doesn't say you can't hold a public meeting. But our code says Planning Commission is the approval authority. So, SB 1537 is silent on who makes the decision. So we're going to go ahead and follow our code because it's not in direct conflict, even though in the larger picture moving forward, we want to correct that and change it. And so whereas on the flip side, where it said you can only notice to 100 feet, our code says 200, that's a direct conflict. Therefore, we need to follow state code on that. So we will do that from now until the new code amendments are in place. We will do this kind of pared down planning commission meeting. I will be bringing this memo to them next week at their planning commission hearing to explain this new process that we will be following. I wanted to bring you all up to date because this is a change for the city. Like I said, we were moving in that direction, recognizing that it was probably a good idea, but now, now that we have SB 1537 in place, it makes it pretty much something that we just need to move forward with.
I got a quick question. So, like with Little League, you can be more stringent than the state statute or state rules.
Usually, not in
usually,
this
except
case.
for this one. Now it said you must.
That's right.
And so you would also, if we weren't doing our 50-year plan, would we look to amend those codes now?
Correct. Yeah.
Kind of do them
That's right.
sooner and do. And you had mentioned, like when it's under 5 acres or 20 units,
Sure.
is there a number that big, like kicks into a planning committee? I mean, if it's hundreds of houses, I mean, there's no number. If it's limited land use.
It's
no.
limited land use. And it comes back to the issue of, is there discretion in the decision? And there really isn't. If you're meeting all the criteria for right-of-way widths, your lots have all the proper, lot width and frontage, you're meeting all your square footage requirements, there's nothing you can say no to if it's checking all the boxes.
Do you see a percentage, like are most of them all perfect within zone if they're smaller, or is there mostly a variance or a kind of a conditional use? Is it?
I would say most of ours are outright permitted, just not really, going outside the norm.
So it seems like you said a lot of pro things would be faster. What's the cons on that?
That's
I
a good
mean-
question. I guess the only perceived con might be that it's less in the public eye, when the actual decision is made. In the practical sense, though, staff vets thoroughly every land use application so that when it's going to planning commission, it is with a staff recommendation for approval, because we work out all the kinks before we bring it to planning commission. And then it'll list all the conditions of approval in order to make it compliant. Although we get it as close as we can, there may be something we're really mostly in the conditions restating the standards that need to apply. They're straight from the code in most cases. So the difference here is that staff is making that decision and mailing out, the decision, the notice of decision, rather than having the planning commission sit in a room and say, yes, we agree with everything and we are approving it. So
That's what I was thinking, like the lack, probably the lack of transparency that might seem like. So is there a way, and I think you mentioned there's a time that they can write in.
yeah, so and this is not a change, this is how it's always been, even for staff level approved limited land use decisions now, like say a partition. We provide notice once the application is deemed complete. We send out, not the entire application because it could be quite large, but the partition plat, maybe their narrative, their application form to neighbors. They have 14 days in which to comment prior to a decision being made. And so when we receive comments, we will send them to the applicant so that, if they need to respond to anything, or else staff will provide a response. But in any case, that's always incorporated into the final decision. I wouldn't say that it's less transparent per se, because it's all 100% available and documented why and how we made the decision. It's just not in this room.
Okay.
They're
Thank you.
talking to the state, everybody I've talked to, there really are no cons. The fact that they're trying to speed things up, kind of cut some red tape. and they find that this is just a time thing, not, if I think limited land use are already pretty stringent, and if it makes it more difficult, I don't think they would be doing this, but I think they think these are things that are, it's actually going to speed up time and save money in the long run.
All right, Rebecca, Sky.
Yes.
Edward. So this is very similar to the conversation we had earlier about processes that we've been doing for a long time. People say, why are we doing this? I experienced that in Stanfield quite a bit prior, where we brought these subdivisions to the Planning Commission. And as great it was to have a meeting about that, your question is, well, can we say anything about this? I mean, it seems like you already have the decision. We can't really oppose it. So they're rubber stamping what the staff had already shown. And the only process it really did is showing that we're doing the work. But the notification still goes out to the public the same in both these processes. So there's no difference in notification. So that it really was just an extra meeting for developers or a commission that didn't really have any authority to do anything different than what the code already says. And a lot of them didn't even have the experience to go through because it's very technical on like public work standards and other things. It's like, what do we say about this? We just have to go with it. So it does speed it up. It takes away that why are we doing this factor. It takes away the rubber stamp. But the other side of that doesn't mean that we can't do things. And so one of those things I know I've talked to NJ about, we're talking about our goal 1 with communication and collaboration. I know that there's discussions, and I don't have the view, so this is just a preview of potential things that we could do, where there's like, well, it'd be nice to have a map where people can see what's going on. So if anybody wanted to look at a development, they could pull up on the map. Oh yeah, it has all the plan stuff there. So even though we're only doing the 100-foot notices, anybody can go on and see anything that's public record without having to do a public records request to pull it up. It's there all the time. And that would actually be a more visual public process than we're even doing right now, just because it's a way that we can collaborate and do things outside of this. That is just a different way of thinking of things, I would say. So yeah, there's not really a whole lot of
One you might find is if you're limiting your to 100 feet versus 200, it doesn't give local cities the opportunity to look at it maybe, and it's putting everybody on that same page on it.
Right.
I don't think this affects the appeal process, does it?
No, not at all.
Right. And if there's anything that does involve discretion, conditional use, that still goes to the plan. Once again, if they have discretionary measures, it's going to end there. This just takes away the
Non-discretionary.
process that is just pretty much set in stone. Yeah,
People
non-discretionary.
Probably went to them with these cases. Look, how much extra time, meetings, money, all this, and nothing was done. Nothing was changed. They said, let's step out.
Right. And sometimes, once again, time is money. So to a developer, if they have to wait for a month or two to get a planning commission meeting where the staff could have approved it 2 months earlier, they're waiting on their, and for the developer side, it just really is time and money for them. That really isn't providing the city any additional benefit. It's just holding a meeting.
In that lull period, we often get questions from developers like, hey, can I get started on my construction documents? Can I get started on my building permits? Like in that waiting time, they're really eager to go. And this is just kind of holding them up.
Thank you.
Update tonight.
Just an update. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Here, moving on. Calendar time.
Thank you.
March 3rd. March 13th, we do have a planning commission. I guess I could say, does that change anything on Juana's? I saw what it says in there, so not much.
So
Caught.
Yeah, so right now we're kind of in that in between where we're still having the meeting, but not a hearing. And so the applicant won't be able to provide an initial presentation or answer planning commission questions, because again, that constitutes new evidence. It's a hearing. But we did observe the new 100-foot notice that the state requires, so we're already implementing that.
Thank you.
And just real quick, Mayor, I just want, before you guys leave, thank you for all that you do. You really have done a lot, not just with the grants and planning, but just everything you do. You guys do good work, so I appreciate what you do.
Everywhere I read, it talks about how confused our land use process is, so it's really nice to have experts keeping us updated and
Great job.
educated little every day.
Mr. Mayor, I'm gonna say something in my comments, but you guys won't be here, so I just wanted to say thank you to staff for these late nights too, when you could be home with your family. Lori, I know you have a ways to drive, so we do appreciate you being here in person and giving us the briefing.
Thank you all for what you do. We appreciate it.
You're here every late night.
We kind of sign up.
I do hear a lot of compliments.
Thank you, Tyler. I
I
appreciate
try to
that.
pass them on when I can, but we do have a lot of compliments out there from businesses that are dealing,
Yeah.
as hard as they're working, and I know it's frustrating sometimes for them. They keep saying, you guys are amazing to work with. Yeah, so
Thank you all.
Thank you.
March 17th, urban renewal meeting at 6 PM, followed by a city council meeting at 7 PM.
St. Patrick's Day.
St. Patrick's Day. Almost birthday. March 20th, EDC meeting at noon at this time, I believe. Okay, that's all we have for right now on that calendar. City manager update. Anything good to report tonight?
Things always good. Yeah, just a quick update on some things going on in the city. Follow up, we have mentioned several conversations about grants. In total, we're applying for about 17 grants over the last 4 months, so it's quite a bit of staff work beyond what they normally do for some of these things. And it does cross every sector. We have an industrial grant that's going to help with the salt well that we're looking for. We have 2 LGGB grants, which is the local government for parks purposes. That's hopefully to help with grad porn. We have that public land grant we talked about that we've got applied for. Main Street, they talked about today. We have a presentation for our park trails grant that we applied for in November. So we have that tomorrow down in Salem. So Charlotte and Dave and I will be, I think they're allowing us to do it remotely, but that is tomorrow. As well as TSP downtown and I sector grant. So there's quite a bit going on. We're looking for ways to really help make things happen that help us go towards our goals, but to limit the exposure to the public on that and to help with our budget. I've been going to, and just as an update, I don't think I've updated the council on this before, but we did mention it today, what type of things. I have been attending the senior center monthly meetings to help build that relationship with them. It's been great to see the progress that they've been making as they're working through their different projects and to be able to participate with them on that. County commission meetings, CET meetings, and I've started working with CCOM and their new interim director. I had some good meetings with him as well. I'm working towards with that with Chris. I did have, as part of our goal meeting process, I had a couple people reach out. They're excited to hear what the council's goals were. To see the direction just from community feedback, they felt they were excited about the way that the council had gone. So I thought that was good feedback to give back to the council. One of them, just talking about the health and safety, we talked about parks opportunities and can we get stuff going. It was interesting just having that on one of our goals. We already had Columbia County Sports reached out and said, hey, we want to partner with you and figure out how to make some of this stuff go forward, see if we can get some grants and other things to help move some infrastructure on there. So I haven't had my meeting with them. That was just this last week. Once again, only just simply because we had the goals out there, they started getting some excitement in the community of how can we really make some of this stuff happen. So I'll be meeting with them as well. Some developments coming that we're working on. Project Spice is still in the mix. We don't have an answer either way, but it's still, that's a big industrial partner business that we're looking at hopefully getting out here. And once again, one of 3 cities in the US and Canada that they're looking at, but we're still a player in that. So hopefully it lands here. I know that CET is working a lot on that, and we're following up as best we can, as well as working with the PUD and their power stuff with that. Developments, Buxton, Hauser, and Dutch Canyon, those should all be moving forward. In early spring, you start seeing some things go vertical or some additional road for the user and Buxton ones get started in spring, early summer. But the last 2 items, budget season is here. Staff is pretty busy with that on top of everything else, trying to figure out all the budget stuff. It's not easy. There's a lot to look into. So once again, I appreciate the staff for all the extra time and work that they're doing on top of the regular daily activities that this season adds to that. One last update for communication as well that we've been working with. We did reach out to our app, those who host our app, to kind of see the capabilities and see if we can reframe that and make it more usable for our community. And if there's a way we can get community calendars or notifications that are more relevant, to have people use it and be able to communicate with the city through surveys and other things as well. So working on those actively, still a lot more to do, limited staff time, but staff is busy doing a great job.
One question on the senior center, maybe look at having them come in, giving us an update in the next couple months, especially right, maybe for budget. Before we investing. You haven't heard from them in a while. What's going on over there?
That's a good idea.
Session or
During a regular meeting.
minutes at the beginning of a meeting, get an update.
Bingo going.
Bingo and food.
Their bingo, I guess, is record numbers. They've been doing great with it. So
Not hearing anything, good thing. Thank you, city manager. Police department, Chief Llewellyn.
Good afternoon, Mayor and also council. A couple things. This morning I went down to Watch County Sheriff's Office to their training program. A great conversation about having our new officers once get hired go through their pre-academy program, which is a 9-week program, really just to help the officers ready to go to the basic academy down at Salem, and also talking about starting the Scappoose Police Department Reserve Program back up again, maybe in 2026. And Washington County Sheriff Office they have a reserve officer program and are able to help facilitate that too as well. So really good stuff there. It was a really good meeting we had this morning. Today, our officers participated at the Warren Elementary School with Read Across America. Much a situation where you have the officers just reading to the local young students there too as well. So really good thing. Another community outreach that was put out. And with that, by the end of this month, we'll have our new sergeant on board. Finally, made it through the gauntlet of becoming a police officer. Other supervisors just finished the process of background portion, so we still have some time out from there as well. And he started this week, like I said before, our 06 shift adjusting. So that's been starting through as well. I'm just going to continue on with that. And like I said, hopefully by the end of 2026, we can just shorten that gap. Which is the goal. Can't promise, but that's so. Those just real quick highlights. Unless there's any questions for me.
No, I appreciate also the code enforcement that is you guys are posting.
Yes,
Great.
it's an ongoing process that will
Yeah.
never end. I've worked here, but we're going to continue to do that and build our program. So it's never going to stop. But we're going to continue to work on that. We'll try to start putting stuff in newsletter as well to just remind people of certain ordinances out in the city. So
Great. Thank
I have.
you so much.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Counselor Haugen.
Just it's nice to see all the initiatives afoot in Scappoose in the city. It's cool.
You, Counselor Jacobs. Counselor Holmes.
Nothing tonight.
Santiago.
So on the 20th, I attended the EDC committee meeting. It was great discussion. It was a great, very productive meeting. A discussion about parking. But there was also, they decided on their goals. And I know that they written down, so these are my notes, but they might be, but you get the general idea. So they had 4 review feedback on downtown overlay. And also they discussed parking. Number 2 was to increase business outreach to businesses. 3 would be to provide a letter of support to development of the hotel. And then 4th is completing their strategic plan. I know that Brian's here, so if I miss anything, let me know, Brian. And also a reminder that on April 26th is Earth Day cleanup, so put that on your calendars, please. That's it.
One thing on there too is I think at our last meeting when we voted and talked about Christmas a lot with business as well. I don't know if they want to look when they do their business outreach, if they do it later in the year, that we look to have other businesses decorate too, and maybe
Would be great.
Council President Miller.
Thank you, Mayor. I attended the February 26, 2025 County Commissioner meeting. There wasn't anything of relevance that I think impacts the city. They did cancel their March 5th County Commissioner meeting, which is this coming Wednesday. Just a few things that I want to call out here the county's calendar too, because there's a lot of overlap that affects our city of Scappoose and our residents. And I'll start printing this out for the mayor to see if he wants to read it when we go over our calendar at the end each month. But just a little bit of example here. So the Traffic Safety Advisory Committee is on March 5th at 7:30. And I should add that a lot of these are either virtual or there is a virtual option. Let's see here. Local Public Safety Coordinating Council, LPSCC. That's a virtual only on March 7th. Homeland Security and Emergency Management Commission, HMEMC. That's at Public Works on March 11th. But those are some of the examples. And well, here's another one that's a good one. Columbia County Youth Housing Meeting. So all these things can impact the city of Scappoose. So I would encourage our citizens to dial in, and also, of course, our city councilors as well. Ben, I have a question really quick about the app capabilities. Are we looking at all at some sort of SMS capability that our residents can potentially sign up for?
That is a discussion topic, whether the SMS or our notifications or both. Because if we get enough app usage and they're not turning off, if people can turn on and off what type of notifications they want, it may solve that purpose. But we might find that people are turning off every notification, because I know I do that. And maybe the SMS just really puts it up there for those who are interested. But at the same time, with some of those people, they end up just hitting stop because they get sick of seeing those text messages too. So they're both in discussion, yes. It's just working through what the best pathway forward with what we have, and hitting one of them and tackling it, and then getting that moving, new iterations moving forward.
Thank you.
I think that March 5th one, they talked about transportation too, with ODOT and everything, highway access. So county roads don't just touch our city. So if you have issues with the roads, they're a good one to talk to. All town meeting is April 5th. We're working on that, agenda items and guest lists and everything, but probably be 9 to noonish at the high school on April 5th. And what we're going to bring it up to is that April 7th meeting, Sheriff Pixley is going to come and talk about the resolution for the jail levy. And because it's kind of a time issue, I'm asking if we are interested in potentially looking at a resolution like we did last time for the jail levy. Well, yeah, resolution to support it. And if we're interested, because we don't have a lot of time after him, we can have a resolution made up, kind of ready to go, that after we do our research from now until then, and we listen to him, if we are interested in a resolution, we'll have it ready and ready to go instead of waiting another 2 weeks. So are we interested in having a resolution written up at that meeting? Probably will have one. And then we can vote. We'll listen to them, do our research. I just handed you out a notice of measure election receipt of ballot title. So that kind of is what they're looking at. Do our research, our due diligence, and listen to Sheriff Pixley, and then we can make a decision April 7th week. That's everything I have for tonight. We are now going to go back into open session.
Mayor, could I cover one more item? Sorry for interrupting. Just because it is of that, I covered this up with Tyler's evaluation, so I missed out my update. But it was a conversation I wanted to have tonight real quick. You may have seen, so we're in the lobbying season of the open legislature meeting. We're getting a lot of requests to lobby on behalf of our city for certain things that impact cities. One of those that came through was SB 49-1. That was the intention to make accelerating infill, expanding local control, but in reality, it actually removes local control. So they're asking us to go, and testify against that. The question I have in general is, if it's something that the council has already discussed, it's very easy for me to jump onto some of these, but some of these are very time sensitive. And if it's not something that the council has discussed, it is a policy type direction. What I'm looking for is direction from the council or approval to advocate on behalf of the city if we don't have time to bring it to council in the meeting, but to be able to lobby for that or to add these? Or do you want us to stay out of those type of conversations? For this one, as an example, the policy question is, are we for local control or less local control? Do we want more of the LCD to give us model codes that we have to follow, or do we want to have some of that leniency to make stuff unique to Scappoose? There could be things said for both sides. So I didn't want to go through, since that wasn't a conversation we've had, to really say, yes, we're going to jump on this. Although my recommendation is we should. I'm all for local control. This is a policy decision, so I didn't want to do that without council permission. At the same time, what some cities will do is they'll say, look, we'll authorize you to be the city's lobbyist for this, to go after things like this. Just make sure to send something else to us. We can be your advisors, send some information back, but in the end, you make the decision. That way it avoids public meeting law issues, because you're not making the decisions, I'm making the decision on that. It's just around these type of things as one potential option. Or the other option is, only if I have time to bring it to you guys do we attack, otherwise we kind of opt out of participating. Or if it's something we've discussed, that I can go forward with it already.
Are you not able to legally email each of us and ask for an individual opinion and don't talk amongst ourselves? If
Right.
one of us say, yeah, we're on the same page, we say the same thing, then you can do it.
Right. That would be the thing is, and I talked to another manager who was doing it, just because this year it seems to be there's a lot of these, and they're very unique situations that we haven't discussed. And I'm newer here, so I'm not quite as comfortable knowing your direction or the policy direction on that. So I asked, just got some feedback from others of what they had done, and they gave that same thing is, they prove you to be the lobbyist. You send out an email on those things to get advice individually from them, but it's not shared among the councils, just to help fuel your decision. And if there's something that's a lot of conflicting, maybe you step back and don't address it, or wait until you can go to a council meeting if there's enough time.
So when you say there's a short amount of time on some of these, what does that mean?
Well, like on one of them, it was give us a response tomorrow. This one, luckily we had a meeting tonight. They came out on Friday with this recommendation. It's due Wednesday. So there's not usually a lot of time to bring it to a council meeting or wait for that. Hopefully our council fits in there.
So this is kind of a difficult one for me, because if we're going to lobby for something and we're expressing as elected officials what our position is on it, the public has a right to know. So in every circumstance possible, I would prefer that we have a public meeting and have these discussions in a public meeting, because the public deserves and has a right to know what our individual opinions are and what we're directing you to do. Mm-hmm. If there isn't time to do that, some sort of heads up would be nice, and then we can call like an emergency meeting or something if it's something of significance that the city wants to put their opinion on. I just, this is a really fine line for me, because of our status as elected officials and what we're representing, and then we're directing you, or at least giving our opinion.
Right, and I don't disagree with you, which is why I did not send anything without bringing this. The last one, they asked for something we had discussed, so it was really easy to go back and say, of course, yeah, we'll send out our testimony that we're for or against. I don't remember what the policy was, but it was something we had discussed, so we already knew what that direction was.
I think there's a solution here. I'm sure that LOC has kind of a watch list of bills, and we could probably get that and maybe walk through it, and we could state our opinions or highlight the ones that are of particular interest, and then give you that direction in the event a bill starts moving quickly. And so then you're empowered to move on it, and we are all fully aware of the positions that we would take.
That work?
Yeah, there's like 2,000 different bills that they're working on right now. When it gets closer, it's easier to start. They want to, I think right now they're trying to kill a lot of the bills before they get brought to the table and become an issue.
Yeah, but I think LOC's probably got a watch list of priority bills.
Well, it's usually around their, yeah, I mean, they do. And it's usually around those, when we did the council, what our priorities were, they have their 15 priorities. So they're around that. But then there are things that weren't even on that list that just come to the table and it's like, whoa. And that's usually where we get this respond by tomorrow, because even the league org in cities feel like they're getting blindsided by something random out there that doesn't make sense. But no, I agree. Like I don't want to go forward and present something that may be in opposition with the council's direction already was, or what our policy is. Not that we have to address every one. We already know what some of those policy directions are. But yeah, say, I don't think we have to hit every single one of these, but we could send it out and see if we need to do an emergency meeting or,
Yeah, there might be some that, like there's a general consensus, like I can't imagine, I would imagine that all of us are gonna be for local control. So if it's things like that, there might be some more global positions that we can come up with on like local control type stuff, because I don't think we do want local control to decide what's best for our community.
right?
But anyway, all that to say that if there's some sort of more efficient way to do it, then by all means.
Well, for my part, I want our city manager lobbying for us. And we could just have an SOP that if there's no time to discuss it in the council meeting, that if 4 votes, then if you're in favor, then you go. If you don't have the 4 votes, then you don't. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, could you, I mean, I feel comfortable that if you feel comfortable, but you give us like a 24-hour notice, I'm emailing you all out. And if I don't hear back from you, or if I hear 4 positives, then I feel comfortable with it. Obviously, if it comes back, then we could say, yeah, I wasn't for that. I mean, but the rest of the council was, and that's voted on. But if one, or you could send it out, if one of us have a question, then you don't do it until we talk about it in the meeting.
You tell me either way, whatever you're comfortable with.
Or I like that if you reach out individually and 4 of us, affirm, yes, please go out and either send an email or provide testimony. That's great. But for transparency, what we could do is in the next meeting, say,
Right.
council directed this action, and then
Be a good way to solve
kind
that.
of log where their position was.
Sounds good.
And then, yeah, if you ever question, if there's 4 that says yes, but you're still kind of on the fence, do you have to do it? Because you said 4 positive responses, or do you say, I want to bring this one back to you and let's go over this a little more before we.
I would leave that flexibility if I think that maybe I didn't relay the conversation well enough, or we needed to discuss a little bit further, if we have time.
Yeah.
Or sometimes we might need to just opt out and say, we'll just let the League of Oregon Cities run this when they've already got enough cities helping or
Given
whatever.
us only a day to decide, then that's kind of on them.
Right, sometimes it just happens. No, I think that would work well, and I like you mentioned, if we bring it back to the meeting next time, hey, here are the things that we really went after, that would give that transparency where the council's directing, so it's not a hidden thing, but it helps us be more agile in what we're doing. Since I already have you here, though, any direction on this one? You good with us supporting the opposition to SB 49-1?
The record, to be clear, that is
To
ensuring we have local control.
more local control, yeah. Not going with the model codes from DLCD. Removing land use goal planning when creating more density, upzoning lands, changing the fundamental makeup of state building code structures, prohibiting minimum density requirements, removing protections for historical district branded as local control, and change inclusionary zoning programs. Those are the key areas they mentioned. You can read that on the League of Oregon Cities bulletin they sent out on Friday. Just open up that link, but it really is the general. It removes a lot of local control if they pass that. I haven't read the bill in its entirety. This is League of Oregon Cities summary, so.
And just more clarification, local meaning state local or local, city local?
City local. Yep.
Okay with you signing that?
I'll work with Lauren, get a testimony or a comment that we can send and support more than just we oppose, but send that to Senator Weber and have them move towards on that one.
Sometimes they reach out through the mayors and ask for mayor signatures on stuff. That's completely on me, correct? I mean, if not signing the rest of the council or SCAPUS, but I'm saying, the mayors have signed this and it's going to the state capitol. Do I need to reach out before I sign my name onto something that the council is behind it as well?
I would recommend best practices. It should similar practice. We want to make sure, because you are representing the mayor of SCAPUS, so it comes across as what SCAPUS supports, and you're representing the council as a whole. Typically, we know what that is. So, I mean, if you already know that this is a policy decision, we already know the council, we've discussed it, by all means. But yeah, if there's something on that, we could maybe send something out, just a quick.
I just remember when North Plains was going through their UGB expansion and they were able to vote a referendum against it or something and do it in the vote, and they wanted mayors to reach out and say that's not the way it should be. We had our hearings and everything, and this is the way it should be.
Right, and that one sounds like a little bit different, where it's not impacting our city directly or our policy directions. You're
No, it's
kind of
nothing-
more putting
yeah,
on
it's
a,
not- It's not gonna affect us. It's just
right.
more of a signature supporting a. Well, then, yeah, if I do that, I will definitely bring it back to you and let you know, guys. Usually just for me, not. If it is for the city, then I'll get everybody's. Okay, anything else?
Oh, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, let's, try to move on this one. We're back on city manager review process. Had a good hour discussion. My feeling is we're kind of looking at, I think we're good about an open dialogue, simplicity. We kind of look at two things in front of us, your competencies, and then Tyler provided as a manager, 6-month a check-in, which is basically your job description or your responsibilities. You just kind of go through and you meet them. Have you done them? Anybody have any feeling on, at least on this 6-month review process?
May I
Yeah,
ask a
please.
question really quick, Mayor? So Susan gave you the draft document there, a concept. I would like to hear from you if you think this is a good idea or not. I'm just trying to make it so that council has very clear guidelines for what we're actually evaluating as a team. And that it's not, as you pointed out, we're not prescribing a way that you have to do things. It gives you a lot of flexibility.
Right. My only concern with this, as a 6-month, it sounds great. If this were to be a quarterly review, this is our criteria for a quarterly, I think it gets really repetitive and the quarterly review might lose some of its conversation, like where we go with it, because it's not as focused necessarily. And a lot of these things are what we do every single day anyway. So it's like, well, yeah, I'm still. It doesn't, like, it almost seems like maybe if this was every year we do this, but every quarter we're just having the what's going well, what things do we need help with, and keep it simple for those quarterly ones. Not broad of, hey, everything can come in. It's just, let's focus on our goals, the projects that we've been working on, what's going well, what can we do to move forward better, or what obstacles we had, what do we need to change. Keep those. I don't want the quarterly ones become so weighed down or repetitive that they become not effective. And then there's no point in doing those. And then we're just doing an extra process, because these things are time consuming. They do take everybody's time. And I want to be cognizant of everybody's time, but to be effective as well.
So so my reply to that is, how do we keep it simple? And as you're saying, but still keep clear guidelines where you know what you're going to be evaluated on.
I think the guidelines would be around, we look at our goals and the sub goals and just say, let's talk about these projects. How are they going? Literally, let's do project based. And then we can, if there's a couple extra things around, well, even in those, you can still talk about, well, how's the staff relationship, or how's the collaboration with the county or whoever. We can still have those discussions, and maybe those some additional topics that we don't have to hit every time, but they can be, hey, I just want to follow up to see, you've been going to the senior center. How is that going? What benefits are we, or whatever. It can be a little bit more broad. And yeah, I realize that people can bring stuff out there, but it's not critiquing specifics. It's asking questions of how can we better these relationships and getting feedback both ways.
But do you want your quarterly to be more informal, like this is our observations, than something like this to be more of an annual?
In general, my recommendation would be informal the whole way through without an annual. It's just every quarter we're talking, update, going through our projects and working on how to be better. How do we really get there? Not necessarily I'm looking for feedback. I'm looking for collaboration with the council both ways of how we can all work together to accomplish everything in my job description, all the goals. I mean, just really to move in the best way forward. They say the goal is not bare minimums here, but how do we do above and beyond?
The only and maybe this is me just being a little too traditional, but if it is tied to a financial component, for me, I would like something a little bit more documented and something like what we're looking at in front tied to what your essential job functions are. Um,
So how does this go towards anything financial? That's the question. How do you use this to actually make it towards a financial, anything other than what we'd be doing anyways? You're meeting your job, we're doing well, we're hitting our goals. Let's do, and like say Scott's recommendation, let's do the salary study every couple of years, make sure we're competitive with the market. You're going to be at, we're looking at some of them, you just get salaries. Some cities don't have a range for this. It's just, this is what we're paying the manager. So you get those. And then some do have salary ranges. They don't tell you what the manager has. You can get those. And I've gone through this enough that you can grab that and come up and say, this is what the range typical for the manager of our size in our city and our level is. If you're feeling that I'm an excellent manager based off we're accomplishing all these things, do we do anything above and beyond that, or is this just where we're at? Are we competitive? Do we feel like we're where we're supposed to be? Typically, those conversations, and I'd love it to go the other way, where you guys are bringing ideas to me of compensation adjustments. That'd be phenomenal. Usually, it's me coming and saying, "Hey, here's some things that I think don't meet the market. I'm requesting these adjustments to my contract. I feel I've been doing a great job. We've been talking about these. Here's the feedback in general, hitting all my expectations, which is the same as this says." Let's.
So what happens when a new counselor comes on that maybe doesn't have any experience whatsoever? How are you going to know what they're evaluating on and if that criteria is fair? Is it just all comments go and if their opinion of you and your performance is good or not?
Well, as you mentioned, it does come down to a consensus. We're having a discussion as a council. And it should be focused around the goals and it shouldn't get in, and there should be ground rules of this isn't a personal attack. You don't like the person, so we're just going to start attacking things. That's not helpful. That's not what this is for.
That's exactly what I'm trying to avoid.
Right. And that would not be helpful if you had a wayward counselor, but you could do that in here as well. Like, I don't think it means that, and then she starts going off the rail of why. And that's why it's important to separate. Once again, traditional review, you put it all together. You've got performance, you've got improvement, and you've got compensation all in one process, and they kind of counter each other and cause harm to each other when they're put together. When you separate those, it's a different discussion. And then sometimes I think that's where even when I'm going through this, it's hard for me I'm like, oh wait, hold on, this is supposed to be the strengths, the moving forward. Over here, if there are issues with these things, we should be having those discussions right away. And if it's a glaring roadblock, we need to maybe address it in the council as a whole. But that would be a separate conversation. If they're bringing that up, the council should be holding that counselor.
Yeah. So I'm just going to say that without structure, with define, it does concern me. That's where I'm at with this. I mean, I don't have, well, obviously it's consensus here, but I do have some pause and I do have concern about not having structure on what exactly it is each counselor is giving you feedback on. I think
I agree with you. I think that's where I agree when you have structure. I think the question is, what does that structure look like? How intense and how valuable, what does that structure look like? I think is really more question I'm trying to get to.
Create a document that everybody can understand. I think we're in.
Mayor, I have a question, I guess, for us, because you're talking about compensation. So I guess just to put it out there on the table, I mean, we're talking increase in inflation, right? And their COLA. Are we talking about a different bonus and depending a percentage of how well they rated? 1% to 5% or 4%. So what are we talking about here?
I don't think this talks
Second
anything
component.
compensation.
Yeah.
This is a review. There's no compensation at all.
There was it was brought up that you get evaluated
That's separate.
and
It's
then
separate. There could be no compensation involved in this. Now, if he asked for something, then he could. I remember one time Alex asked for like another week off and some money. That was kind of asked. Or we said, okay, every 3 years, we're going to do a market analysis to verify where we are. But maybe if he comes in and says, yes, we're doing that analysis, then maybe that review, we go a little deeper, but they aren't, they're separate.
Okay, because it was earlier, the conversation was brought up, some kind of compensation. that
Yeah,
it was
6
gonna be
months.
6 months. So I,
What we keep hearing is that at 6 months, there is a compensation adjustment, not in the contract, but Mr. Miller brought this up multiple times. So I'm trying to, I think we're trying to understand is, what was this conversation? How much money are we talking? Because then yes, if we're saying that the review at 6 months is going to directly impact a compensation adjustment, yes, we need to document and have criteria. What is the compensation that we are talking about? That's where we need clarity. Who has the info?
Well, and I think that was, I mean, what was really captured in the final article, right, was that you don't have a bonus structure associated with the review. Like you completely decouple it.
Right.
So are we saying it's coupled or is it decoupled?
Hold on, let's level set here for a moment. So, Mayor, do you want to, I don't want to speak for you. So you and the city manager have had conversations. There is a, I mean, if I was in your shoes, I'd ask too. You have brought up that you would like to see a potential raise with this review.
Right, the
My understanding-
expectations,
Go ahead, sorry.
sorry, the expectations when I first came in here, the discussion was at 6 months or somewhere, question was what that would it look like? And the comment came up, well, we're doing our police union negotiations right now. And that's going to lead into salary studies for executive staff, and that will involve the city manager as well. There will be an adjustment based off of market adjustments with that. Is it directly at 6 months? It was within this time period that it would be shortly done. So to me, that was the expectation that there would be a look at salary studies and talking to Bob, the recruiter. I mean, I'll give an example. Tillamook or North Plains. North Plains is 3,000, 4,000 people, half our size. It is the salary range that I have and the executive or the other executive staff is below the market. It really is. I mean, their compensation goes up 170,000 for a city half our size. Tillamook just put theirs out. Fairview put theirs out. They're all pretty well substantially ahead of where Scappoose is at. I knew that coming in. I wanted to come in as most city managers do, because I want to make sure that you guys know you have a good manager, that I can make that argument of, okay, now let's get to the market rate. I wanted to give a little of myself, put myself out there to help us get to that conversation.
Okay, to me, you've explained it. The point being is that you would like to see a financial component at this 6 month juncture. Is that correct?
What the question is it tied to an evaluation or is it just separate during a salary study? My recommendation, my recommendation, I don't care if it's public, would be at 6 months, you do a typical half a step. So it'd be 2.5%, not a 5% along my salary scale, but then also include a salary study to adjust our range to be more appropriate with where the market's at.
Okay, I want to clearly differentiate here. So your performance evaluation is not going to be hooked to a compensation component, but yet you're asking for a market study to get you up to where you think you need to be a city manager. Is that correct?
That would be one route to go about it, as Dr. Lazenby had described. That's usually you go through, you do your market adjustments every couple of years, and then you have steps that you go along. Well, I have one more step to go until I be at the top there. So, I would put in there probably in the next year I get a regular step to clear that out. And then going forward, it's just COLAs and market rates occasionally every couple of years. It wouldn't be directly tied to every annual review.
Okay, and I have no problem. I might be coming across a little strong here. I have no problem with that. I'm just trying to make sure that we're all on the same page here.
And I think
I'm all for
typically,
fairness with compensation or anything. So if that's something that we need to look at, I think I guess as we would all be open to looking at that.
and the other part, I mean, it usually closely goes. I mean, your steps are usually after a year, so it usually goes along the same time period. I think that's where it's easily connecting them together. But at the same time, if you have somebody who's not performing, they're not going to get their step, or that whatever it is. So I don't think we have to disconnect or connect.
Let's come back to where we're supposed to be.
Right.
The review is what we're dealing with here. We're not talking about a conversation. We're separate, we're bifurcating them.
Except, yeah, go ahead.
But I mean, so we're looking at the 6-month review, which is not tied to the compensation package. It's a separate argument. So I appreciate the detail here, but that's a separate argument. And so that's nice to have this backdrop conversation, but let's focus on the review thing first. And then if we want to have that second discussion, that's a different matter.
Thing is, and I agree, but when you read his agreement that he signed, it says the manager shall be entitled to receive a cost of living increase to their salary in the same percentage amount at the same time into the city department director. City may increase but not decrease manager's compensation without the need to amend this agreement with mutual written acceptance. Manager's compensation may be adjusted based on merit in conjunction with an evaluation conduction pursuant to Section 5. Section 5 is evaluation. You should provide a formal performance evaluation of the manager after 6 months from the first day of employment. Thereafter, council shall provide a formal performance evaluation of the manager every 12 months. Presentation, it says all evaluations shall be communicated to the manager in accordance with Oregon law. Such an evaluation may include salary and or benefit adjustments if appropriate and decided by a majority of the city council. So if we want to go by this,
Okay.
then I agree. Let's do a performance review at 6 months and then separately look at the compensation based on market research.
Right. My point is not, I don't care if it's coupled with the review or not. That to me is whatever. It shouldn't change the review process. We're looking at this of how to best move forward, regardless of how that works or not. I mean, that time comes, whether it's coupled with that or not, you should know, am I performing manager that you want to make an adjustment to? Or, that's going to be through our quarterly reviews, it's going to be through everyday interactions with me. You're already going to have that opinion. And I don't know if running through this, that's all I'm saying. I don't know if it really changes or should change anything, because it should be the same review regardless. Whatever criteria we use, I'm not for or against. I don't think it really, to me, I don't see a big difference. It should be the same.
So,
So I would recommend that if for the 6 month, I mean, I have no major. If we were to go with Counselor Miller's proposal, I just would have change that we take out. We can use this as the baseline as to say, is Ben meeting minimum qualifications in which we hired him to do? This would be the 6 month meeting the obligation contract. Moving forward, it sounds as if we have a consensus that we want to have a quarterly check-in. That quarterly check-in would be, it's working well, what's not working well, what do you need from us? And to answer the question, which I do agree, there needs to be some level of criteria. I would recommend that we leverage what Ben has recommended as part is write-up of the core competencies, and we use those 7 as the criteria in how we have those quarterly check-ins. With also documented in our process that we provide timely feedback to him will help with performance.
Just one thing. I appreciate this matrix here, but some of the stuff we couldn't even evaluate, like number 9 and number 10. We don't even deal with that. So the 7 core competencies we can address.
but if he isn't dealing the franchise right and we had a problem with it, we would know.
Well, that's where we're also asking on these things for his,
His input.
it at least puts it on the radar and gets it documented.
Do we want any measure of progress towards working on council goals?
Yeah, sorry, yeah, I think to me that is
given.
Yes.
Yeah, but
Yes,
yeah,
it should be
it should be in there, yeah.
So it should be embedded like on the quarterly.
Yeah.
So how, as these core competencies, how is this showing up?
Yeah, we're talking leadership, strategic wise. How are we accomplishing? We're talking about how is leadership being emulated and getting these goals.
And you're going to continue to give us those updates that you talked about earlier, right? Yeah. Okay.
And staff reports will have things highlighted that are goal oriented.
Right. I'm still doing everything. I mean, transparency during our regular conversations for you and the public, I think is just good to know where we're going operationally towards these goals. When we're talking about my competencies or my leadership towards that, that would be that executive session around these areas reflecting of, like I said, there's 7 topics. Let's talk about those, or at least have those discussion points, how they relate, what's going good, what can we improve on. Maybe those are the things we just do that on each one of those. What's going good? What can we improve on? Next one, what's going good? What do we improve on? We have 7 of those discussions.
Isn't that a lot for a quarterly basis?
So I would say like, not going to probably go through all goals every quarter.
Okay.
So then what 2 goals do you want to talk about? Quarter review. Which ones like there's that we want to talk about?
Right. Some of our goals are 2-3 years out. So like our, and it could be quick conversations, like our visioning. We talked about, I talked with you earlier about community heart and soul, and there's some things that we're working on, but it's still going to be months out before we even implement anything. So if we're having that quarterly conversation today, it would be like, well, this is where we started. There's not a lot of movement yet because we're working on these other things right now.
Okay, so
And we can change this if it comes to the quarter and it's like, wow, this is really extensive, like way too much. We can shorten it and change it. And I would want this to be a living document to make it, once again, the most effective that we can for everybody.
I like the core competencies. I just don't want to make it like a whole big 7 in depth and then kind of make it a quarterly. That's a lot for.
Right. Those core competencies is what they'll use sometimes, or most cities will just for the annual city manager, and they go in depth. And that's what I don't want to make that, because there's not going to be that much information over 3 months to really go that in depth. But hopefully having a lot of small conversations will make it easier in the long term, so we don't have to do a 3-hour meeting of everything. So
regardless of kind of what we pick, the idea is like at the next meetings, we didn't do it now, during open session, is have a review, dialogue. Whatever we decide, we'll go over and discuss. They'll either provide us with some answers or some information, whatever we decide. And then there'll be a separate item there to review salary compensation structure.
right. These would be done still in executive session. We're doing the regular updates for goals and stuff in open session. But when we're doing the actual competencies, that would be an executive session to discuss performance type things.
Can I touch on that? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Executive session's purpose is to give direct feedback on his specific performance,
Right.
specific incidents, issues. That is what executive session's for. It's
Right.
not for any other purpose.
So what on the salary compensation, or if we decide, hey, we're going to review the range and look at these other cities, can you do all that in executive session?
Salary. So the correct answer from the DOJ is salary discussion should be done in open session. Do some cities get around that because there's one executive provision about contract negotiations? The DOJ's answer would be the salary aspect should be an open. The contract stuff can be an executive session, or so, there's some area we'd have to clear.
I think that's negotiations.
Right. And so I do know that some will put both, I've talked to different managers. They all have a different process. Some will send their recommendations to the council in advance, and they have their regular review, and then they'll come out and actually talk about what they had. Some will get the attorney-client privilege in there and talk about negotiations. I mean, there's lots of ways to do it, and we can look at whatever best way. I'm not shy. I'm not so worried about that. The public, I have not as big as concern. They should know. It is a public document anyways. And anything I present to you, I want to be able to say is backed up. So it's not like I'm just some crazy person trying to convince you to do something that's outside of the normal. I want to come in and say, this is what the market is really showing and provide the documentation. So
provide that then at the next meeting or the next, whatever it seems right, is your ask
All right.
on salary, and you'll provide them, because I do believe that's what Alex had asked for. She asked for an extra week, 40 hours, and this pay adjustment. And they discussed it in open session a little bit, but provided any reasonings why, or it's one time thing or whatever. So next meeting, we'll just have review compensation and your ask, and then we can discuss and vote on.
Right, I'll get a proposal together and I'll review executive sessions, what's allowed and what's not, and we'll stay within those guidelines. And whatever needs to be discussed outside, we'll discuss outside.
And I do think Ashley did do comps shortly before we initiated the search. And so I would just say it might be worth our time to pay her to have someone on her staff update them if necessary. So we're working off of that same set, because I think she identified some communities that were good equivalent for us.
And have you already looked at that, and do you know what our equivalents are and what they're?
Right, the equivalent, so the typical way I do this, I look at community size, and then I look at communities that are equivalent to us. So for example, Fairview, while they may be a similar size to us, slightly larger, they actually have less staff, by 10 less FTE. So they don't have a police department. There's a little bit less responsibility for that city manager. So it's not quite a reflection, but even still within a 2,000 person range, it's not that different between cities as far as compensation. So then I look at similar size cities or similar economic cities. So for example, Moala would be a great comparable city. Yeah, they're a little bit bigger, but they're really close to Portland like us, similar cost of living. Those things are a lot more comparable than I would say looking at Staten. Staten's, yeah, similar size city, but their cost of living is a lot less than ours. So usually salary has a little bit of that consideration of what it actually costs to live there. And so I try to look at similar size cities. I look at comparables. I consider our county as well. St. Helens, yeah, they may be bigger, but at the same time, very similar. And it's always good to know what the competition is locally for any purpose. So that's what we do with the police union as well. We looked at similar cities. I also like to look at what's coming up from smaller cities. What are they doing? Because once again, I brought up North Plains, Fairview, or North Plains, Tillamook, where it's like, okay, are we really competitive if they're offering more? And that, yeah, they may not be. Well, I would even argue it's even worse because they're not directly, Tillamook's not next to Portland, but North Plains is. North Plains would be a comparable economic status, but it's kind of crazy how they're half our size. And
Well, so we do have one document that pops into my mind is we did have that firm do a salary survey for the police department when they started negotiations, and there's a list of cities that are comparables based on, general cities. So I think one of us can find that for you, Ben, and you can see if that list of cities matches up with your list of cities.
the one concern I have with that is a comparable city for a police officer is different than it would be for a city manager, because for example, a city recorder in cities almost double our size might be getting paid the same as a city recorder here, just because the duties are the same and they have more of them. Or a police officer, we have a lot of these officers. Looking at Hillsborough, they are a direct competitor, and we have to be considerate or cognizant of what they're paying, or Portland areas because they're close enough, as well as St. Helens, knowing how much they're paying. They all become not a normal direct competitor, but they are in relation to the police officer, where I wouldn't say the city manager of Hillsborough is a good relation or good comp for me. I mean, I'd be happy to use them. It would be great, but it doesn't quite fit that mold. I'll take that salary by all means, but
Your comparables will then have a little bit of number of FTE next to it or something to give us an idea. You just pick a city, don't know the population, we don't know, does a police department, fire department, FTE. So instead of just saying North Plains, 15,000 a month, you kind of give us some other things to decide if they are more like us or not. And then we will ask probably Ashley to provide what she has before or an update of what she did before, and we'll just review it. Don't have any problem looking at it. And at the same time, other than just the salary structure, there's a lot of other benefits, compensation looked at as well.
Right.
That can either be instead of or addition to. So to look at the whole package. Salary.
I agree.
Do we think are we clear what we're doing? In terms of,
My understanding is we're gonna use the draft that I did. We're removing 14 though, and then, did I understand correctly? Ben, do you have any issue with that?
No, I have no problem. Like I say,
Like, okay, if we're looking at it, you're gonna come with information, you'll give it to us, it will be in the next, the executive session, so you'll give it to us maybe a little bit in advance, so we read it ahead.
well, I would prefer just having a conversation. We can go through these and just talk about them.
It's fine.
Um,
And I'm like, the things you have here in your competencies kind of relate, it's like, well, did you do this? Well, here's how I did it, and we'll just discuss in executive session.
It can be really fast too.
Yeah, it
I mean,
can.
you can just go through, I did this by this. I mean, it
Right.
doesn't have to be.
And then I think we'll give us a little bit of time. We'll iron out down the next, when it is and what we're gonna be doing at the court meetings and what we'll be asking.
Okay.
And if we're ready, then you have in the regular meeting compensation discussion, possible. And yeah, we'll find out what we can talk about in executive session. Tie it together at all. Okay? Get this first one done and we'll make adjustments as we go.
I also like to see how that, maybe it's, would reflect on the budget. I'm sure you got it all. If you, this is what I'm asking for, I'm sure you're gonna take a look at the budget and see how it. works.
Right. I wouldn't be asking for
Right,
something that we
right,
can't.
Going again
afford
to
with.
everything here, everything I've noticed flows downhill. Everything goes down to all the other departments and that all affects budget.
Right. And
We
just
wanna
so
be one good cohesive family.
Right, and we talked about that with the FOP contract when I first got here in relation to mine. That was the whole conversation is the rest of the staff needs that review as well. We've already accomplished a couple of them as I did some changes with like NJ and Susan and we combined some stuff. So I did a quick salary study to find out comparables of their type positions and what we need to adjust them for as we adjusted their job. So we already accomplished some of that, but the directors we have not done at this time. But that's on our mark of organizational things that we have to work on.
I think that's probably the most important. Our staff is our we have, so we want to.
And then perhaps one final comment is maybe have everybody reread Lazenby's story, because I've taken classes from him, and he really knows his stuff.
Good. Okay. Any more questions? Thank you. Meeting adjourned.